don't want to answer any. Oh, look at there. Look at there. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
You are welcome. I'm sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Susan.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yay, she did actually get off. Good. We will likely not just open up to questions at the end, but you'll see this is the start of some dialogues. So we will be taking questions, and if you've got questions, you feel free to put them in the chat, but we just may not get to answering those today. All right, now let's see if we can share screen. All righty. Hopefully you guys are seeing a structure of Legos. And we use that as a template for this because lots of small, tiny parts that have got to fit together just right to make a structure work that we are all going to be happy with and proud of. And so it's going to take all of us sort of putting our Legos together and working together to build something. Also, like Legos, if you step on one, you're going to end up doubling in pain. So we've got to be very careful of not having any of these little bits and pieces left on the ground to trip us up as we move forward. So let me take us back to the beginning here, and we'll just talk through. Can everybody give me a thumbs up if you're seeing a screen with lots of stuff on it? Okay. All right. Okie dokie. So again, we're coming at this from Project Hope Foundation as a nonprofit. And as you know, our mission is a lifespan of autism services. So we're celebrating 25 years of them this year. So we've had our chance to make lots of mistakes along the way, to have a lot of learnings, and we're hopefully going to take those into this next venture and be wiser than we were when we started. Certainly, back when Susan and I were very young parents of little fellas. Colby is now 27 and Michael turned 30 on Sunday. So we definitely have housing in our minds because our guys are fitting on the part of the spectrum that is going to require ongoing support. Our plan is certainly to live forever, but if that doesn't work, I know many of you have that same plan. If it doesn't work, then we want to have some very good backup. So we've been thinking about this for a long time. We're a little bit ahead of most of you. Our guys are a little bit older. So, you know, somewhere in that teenagedom years, we started knowing that we're going to have to come up with a long-term sustainable plan. And so over the years, when we first started, the model that was out there was really institution. The trend for models now has become community-based. So lots of the institutional settings have been closed. So that's no longer an option, even if it was an option that we really wanted. There are a number of models out there that are identified, and transitional is one of those. That's a very short term, 2 to 3 months, maybe a year, but you're moving somebody from one setting into another. Supported living for those people who just need a little bit of help, but they're able to be in a home of their own, an apartment of their own, and they dictate, that consumer, the participant, our children, would direct what that program would be. Yes, I want some help today. No, thanks, I've got it. That kind of thing. Supervised living, as you would think, has more of a somebody's with them, available to them 24/7. And that model right now, we're seeing a lot of host home sort of scenarios. So that is a situation where, as a parent, we would basically, it's almost a foster care situation. So our adult would go live in the home of someone else who would be making decisions for that person. Group home living is sort of defined as 8 or fewer, and that is when the home would be owned by the provider agency. Intermediate care facility, the ICF, that's more of that institutional setting, which is we're shifting away from. We don't really have access to those, even if we wanted them. And then this agricultural autism community / farmstead, which if you read it is really not necessarily a farming scenario. It's more not urban housing. And it has that combination of supervision and support with the thought that this is more of a community unto itself versus that out in the integrated into the wide breadth and depth of the community settings. So none of these are exactly what we think we need. Pieces of all of it, pieces of them, some sound good, some don't sound good at all in any way, shape, or form. But certainly looking at some sort of variation on this autism community is where we anticipate that we would likely, as a group, be most interested. But when you actually go out and look to see what's there, as opposed to just what's listed as options, primarily what we're seeing are these group homes, usually 4 people, and they're scattered across the community. So not together, but one in one neighborhood, one in another neighborhood. Or there's been a fairly good groundswell of some apartments and homes that are meant for people who are in the position of being able to leave, drive themselves, go to work, and they just need this minimal check-in support. So we are seeing some of those. Again, not what most of us are needing. So our first goal is always to look to see is somebody already doing it. And so can we just copy it? Can we just build the same Lego structure that they have? But we have not seen one out there that we really think is the way to go. Not a good, clear, easy answer. So if we look right now at facility options, we're in a better position than we used to be, in that we actually own 4 locations. 2 of them would lend themselves to the ability to put structures on them. So one in Woodruff, probably the one that many of you are familiar with, and this is 13 acres. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is our service area right now. And we own here to the point, so this triangle, but we also own over here sort of a stretch of land that goes from this road over to the road on this side. So this is our life skills house here. So we do have room to grow there. And then in Landrum, if you haven't been to that campus, 40-something acres, and it goes out down this pave to a road, and then we do own back here these fields. So not all of it buildable, but potential room. And many of you know that even back as far as 2013, we were looking at what could we develop that would work on the Woodruff property, which we now own. So if you haven't seen it, I'll just give you a little flashback to, at the time, this area here was the existing facility. So, and this is the trees that are still there. So could we do sort of a apartment dorm, but people having their own space with potentially communal space on the ground floor, but right there beside services, so that our adult services, our employment opportunities, this would be a new structure. So something to provide more room for growth in terms of employment. So could all of this be situated right there together, with the idea that we could put, if we even just went 3 stories, we'd have the ability to put a number of apartments that might meet the needs of our grouping. So that was our initial sort of look to see what could we do to provide a safe area for people to live close to where they were receiving services, close to where they were working. And to be honest, this still looks kind of good to us.
Yes.
This model still makes sense in that it provides us the ability to give a variety of individualized type space and support in an efficient way, because it's all sort of situated close together. So what we did not figure at that point, and still have not come up with the best solution, is how do we staff whatever structure we decide is good for our group. So to talk about staffing issues, we just wanted to kind of review a little bit with you who the players are, because most people, when they think about how would we pay long-term for the support, the staff support that my person needs, you think in terms of Medicaid waivers. And as I'm looking out, there's a number of you are on Medicaid waivers, but those are the source of funding that's available right now for services that are for our adults. So there's two groups that deal with Medicaid waivers. DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, and these are state agencies. So the Department of Health and Human Services is the entity through which Medicaid money flows. So those of you who've got ABA therapy right now, that's coming through, if you've got Medicaid funding, it's coming through DHHS. And then DDSM, the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs. And that entity is tasked with these waivers, managing these services. Now, there's a little bit of flux right now between those two as to, what's going to happen, if that's going to maintain as it does now. But well, at least at this point, they are both involved. Okay, let's see. There we go. So a Medicaid waiver seems to make sense, as that would be a source of paying for services, especially when they have a service called residential habilitation. And there's a variety of types of that residential habilitation. But just again, this is first cover for all of us, and we're just trying to do some broad sweeps here. But that waiver service triggers two really big barriers for us to think that this is going to work: the critical needs waiting list and final rule. So the critical needs waiting list is, as it sounds, if you sign up for that, you are saying this person has no access to a caregiver. So in our situations right now, none of us could sign up for that. So it's not something that we can do in preparation. You can only access that list if there's not a caregiver available. When you're on that waiting list, as it stands now, there is no choice for a family and there's no choice for a provider. So when your name, if you are the first person on that waiting list, then you are assigned to a facility wherever in the state, and the only option is to take it. You can't pick amongst different facilities, nor can providers pick among different participants. So as it stands now, this would not work for us. And I say that because we have learned in the world of autism, and I know some of you have been around there a long time, that things can evolve. But right now, that's pretty much an obstacle that I don't think any of us are interested in. And we're not interested in providing a system that would work under that particular structure. The other is final rule. And the final rule is a federal piece of legislation and regulations. Again, they call it final rule. We also have learned to think nothing is too final. but it was designed, those of you who know PDD waivers, if you remember those, same sort of scenario. It was designed for all the right reasons. It was designed to try to make institutional settings not warehouses, and to provide inclusion for people of all disabilities. The problem is that it does not take into consideration some of the specificities of our autism population and their specific needs. So because the purpose behind it is to have people out in the community integrated, included, they will not fund services. They will not fund for residential services if they're adjacent to other services. So that beautiful arrangement of all right there, like at the Woodruff campus, for example, would not be funded because it's too isolated. Things like not wanting gates. Again, we've got an elopement issue for 50% of our population, so that's troubling. If you are doing sort of that dorm or apartment, if, for example, if what we just looked at was not adjacent to our Woodruff clinic services, but somewhere else, you would need to have 2/3 neurotypical population there. So we'd only be able to serve a smaller number of folks on the spectrum, and we would need to be open. We become sort of a landlord to other folks. Again, not exactly what we are envisioning as the best use of our resources or the best environment for most of our population that we're planning for. So in terms of where we are, the board has committed that we are going to develop another model, sort of like we did with the education, sort of like we did with therapy, sort of like we did with adult services, that we're going to try to find a way to create a model that meets the needs of our community being all of us who are in that HOPE family at this time, and growing as we add clients. So all options are on the table as we look at this. So looking at a structure that's owned by Project Hope Foundation, structures that are owned by some third party who is friendly to our cause, someone who would be more apt to be in the facility end of it. And then we would still work on the staffing part, or family-owned models. So where people have bought into some sort of home or apartment. So we're considering everything at this point. Certainly want to get your input, but we feel like all those are viable options. So we've also spent a great deal of time learning from others as best we can. And so I'm just going to touch quickly. We'll touch on a couple that we have gone to visit and that we've had people come talk to us. I will tell you of all the people that we've talked to, the overwhelming advice is, if you don't have to do it, don't do it, because it's hard. We wouldn't expect anything less, but just there's no one out there right now who's just saying love this process and have found the way to work around all the challenges. So Mark, I'll let you sort of jump in on talking about Phase-On, which we've gone to see, and we've also had folks from Phase-On come to see us, which is in Virginia.
Yeah, so I would say around the time that we were that drawing was rendered in 2013, Phase-On was just starting their own process, and they built an apartment style complex. And it also had a mixed use in that the bottom floor was also for commercial property as well. So we went up there and toured their facility. They said they would do a lot of things different. Like Lisa said, the biggest really barrier for them is that they are now landlords for a pretty large population who do not have autism. And so many of the consumers who are on the spectrum that are served there at their facility in Virginia are very independent, I would say. So they are able to come and go as they please. They do have a BCBA who resides there on campus 24/7 to try to respond to issues as quickly as possible. But I think in going up after they had been open for about 2 years, this was pre-COVID, they said that this model is good for some, but they've learned a lot from it and had some cautious words. So.
And more, they also had some folks who needed more support that were in
Mhm.
that host family scenario too, right?
Yeah. And I think that was, they had even more caution about that model as well. So
Some of the things being, because those host families depended on income based on providing services, it means that as parents or other family members, we could not, go get somebody to go on a vacation or go to a doctor. We would have, there was a very standoff sort of relationship that had to be in effect. So again, not
an opposite of that as well. If the host family wanted to go on vacation, then the person that they were serving was suddenly homeless for a week.
right.
So there was a lot of coordination that had to happen. That's very difficult to make happen.
Yeah.
okay.
We also toured First Place out in Arizona, and very similar. This almost looks identical to the drawings that we have of the apartment style facility layout in Woodruff. Once again, with the exception that they also have most of the residents there do not have autism. So they have a beautiful facility. I do believe that facility is mostly private pay. And I think their cost when we toured 3 years ago was around $5,200 a month, I believe. So they were a very nice looking facility, but cost will be a big factor and hindrance for most families being able to afford that. So
good to see it though, and good to get some of the design, some of their design things that they had thought of. I think would be things that we would want to consider.
Great piece of space.
Mhm.
Swimming pool in the middle of their complex. Very, very nice, beautiful rooms, apartments, all the nice shared spaces, some teaching spaces for cooking. So a lot of good ideas came from going and touring there. And then also more locally, down in the Myrtle Beach area, Oak Tree Farms was started by SOS probably a year and a half ago or so. And they have 3 and 4 bedroom units, houses, individual houses, and their funding is set up completely differently. They are falling under the low income category. So that is, they're applying to HUD to get funds to build, and the members who live there also have to be in that category, low income. And all of the individuals that they serve there are also very independent. All of them have jobs and work throughout the day. They do receive employment services from SOS as well. But when looking at kind of the setup that they had there with the support that was being provided, it was clear that would not be a good option for a lot of our families, for the kids and adults who need more intensive supports and services. And then even closer to home, we toured in dwellings back in 2019, I believe it was. And this was a local nonprofit that raised funds to build a home in Greenville, specifically to meet the needs of family members, kids, similar to kind of what we're trying to get started here. And they were the really first ones who indicated that barrier of the critical needs waiting list. So even though they had built something with their daughters in mind, and a small group home for women with similar needs, they found very quickly that their daughters couldn't be handpicked to live in that space. And so I think it was a tremendous letdown and barrier for them moving forward. They have since closed their doors. I think Lisa, do you remember what?
I think it was 2020.
2020. Yeah.
Yeah.
So only a year after opening, unfortunately. So a lot of great ideas, and we have been, all across the country to gather information and figure out what works and what doesn't work, and are still open to hearing your thoughts and things that you've seen. I mean, we get constant emails and videos that pop up of farm up in upstate New York, or something that's opening up even locally in South Carolina. So if you see things, we are open to go explore those options and figure out how they're making it work and if it works for us.
So one of the things that we are trying to explore in as many creative ways as possible is what would be the option for ongoing payment, since that is going to be the challenge for most of us, is how do we continue to pay for staffing, since we are trying to plan for a long-term duration. So some of the things that are out there, again, just to make sure we've all got the same vocabulary, the SSI payments that are available when you turn, it's 18, correct, Allison? Not a huge amount of money, but going up with some regularity, but in that $400, $500 range a month. Palmetto Able, also called SC Able, sometimes called stable accounts, that will allow folks to put money into an account that could then be used for a variety of needs. Those have some different restrictions to them, but the main one is that you are limited to $15,000 a year in terms of putting money in. I'm just going to take a side note here to say, if you have the ability to set up one of these accounts, taking housing out of the picture, you can use that money. You get some tax advantage to putting that money in, and you can use that money for a wide range of things that for the person with a disability, including like tuition. So it's something to check into, and we have information about that on our website and webinars about that, and about special needs trust. Those trusts too are not designated for housing and food, but we could potentially see how that we could use some of that for staffing. Being creative with Medicaid waivers in terms of respite services or other services, so not residential services, but how could we perhaps access other services that would be available without triggering the issues with the critical care list or with the final rule. Housing vouchers kind of refers to what Mark was talking about. If we went to a low income sort of scenario and approached it that way, that there might be some money that would help with the facility costs that would then maybe free up some money for the staffing cost. So we're looking at all of these and then also searching for other ways to come at it that might open up abilities for us as families to cobble together what we would need to provide ongoing support. We are moving this to the forefront in terms of our projects. We wanted to sort of move through getting our therapy, our education, our adult service solidified a bit. And so we are going to follow what we learned for those grassroots efforts for ABA funding. Again, those of you who have been around for a while, Derek, know that, sorry, my son is fixing some supper. There was no ABA funding available back in 2006. So, you had to start from scratch, and we had to get things to change. So that may be how we have to approach this housing, is that things are going to need to be changed. I'm sorry, Kobe, I'm on this. You can get some off the refrigerator. You have to look, buddy. So several steps to this. One, building key relationships. So we definitely need to get in with DHHS and DDSN. Thankfully, we are in a good position right now. Director Robbie Kerr, who is the head of Medicaid, DHHS, has a longstanding relationship with us. We actually had him help us when we were lobbying to get better rates for Medicaid. His lobbying firm worked with us. He has visited us several times. He's come and toured. He gets the need. And so that he's a good person to have in our corner. Director Michelle Fry, who's relatively new with DDSN, has also already come and spent a good bit of time with us. We've already raised this as a concern with her. And she is someone who I think is going to be interested in making a difference while she's here. We also have several commissioners of DDSN who are very familiar with the situation, the problems, and sympathetic to that. We are trying to build relationships with our legislators. So both on a local level, state level, and a national level. So one of the things that we want to work on is trying to get folks in to see us. We face the battle of people knowing about a little bit about autism and thinking they know the whole spectrum. So we need to be sure that they are aware of the fact that, not everyone is going to be in a position to be independent in living, and that we need to be prepared to meet those needs across the spectrum. And then community leaders. So for example, Woodruff, we're trying to build those relationships with the local community so that they want us around, should we choose to locate here or wherever we are. We want people to be excited about supporting our population. As we all know, the more people who love our loved ones, the better we all are. So it's important to build those relationships now. We're going to continue to learn from others. So we're still visiting other places and talking with the people, even the ones who we know this is not going to work for us. We certainly can gain information from them. We're part of CASP, CASP network, the Council for Autism Service Providers, which is a bit of an investment for us. You have to pay to belong, but it gives us access to over 200 for-profit and nonprofit autism service providers across the country. And that has been really helpful to us to be able to network with those who are even older than we are and even bigger than we are. We are the largest provider right now in the state of South Carolina, but there are certainly people, entities out there who have widespread campuses across many locations in a state or even between states. So in the first weekend in May, for example, we're sending some key leadership folks up to go to one of their annual conferences and to check in on what's happening on the residential front there. And then they also have groups that we can belong to that will have regular meetings about residential. Greenwood Housing Project, when we learned that a group of nonprofits in Greenwood were interested in looking at low income housing and how to develop that, we joined in the mix there, not as participants, but as people to learn. So we've gone to their initial workshops and are continuing to meet with them as they develop this plan. It gives us a good example of how to build a community from the ground up, and talking with some folks with some expertise out of Atlanta who have built a variety of housing options. Hey, buddy, can you turn that water off, please? Thank you. And then just friends that we know who are interested in providing supportive housing. Grace Church, for example, is interesting in working on housing. Their population initially are going to be not autism, but again, we can learn from that, and we can build those relationships. And we've already talked with them as well about our needs. So they are vested in us in a number of ways. So we think they'll be a good partner in whatever fashion transpires. Then we also want to add to this mix this whole internal information. We needed to reach out now to you, our families. And we'll probably start that with just some initial surveys of information. And Lord knows, we know you don't need more paperwork to fill out, but we'll just try to get some general sense of where folks are. And then we will likely do some small group meetings to try to have some conversations. So you're not just limited to checking a box, but we need to be thinking in terms of who your advocacy relationships are. Who do you know that we need to get to know? Who do you need to invite to come meet us? The expertise that is in our circles. We certainly know that among all of our circles and networks, we've got people who have expertise in a wide variety of things, from facilities to agent personnel management to just how to develop relationships with the community. Then preferences. So if you're like Susan and me, you think about this a lot in the back of your minds, but sometimes we've got to bring it to the forefront to think, oh, okay, so what would this really look like? So we need to have some ideas of what your thoughts are as to what would this look like to best support your person. What are those things that we maybe have not thought of, or that we need to know this is something that impacts many people, or that a few of you are very interested in X and more of you are interested in Y. So just getting those sense of, what would make the life that you would hope for your person. We've met with a couple of parents who were looking at an option of buying a house and doing a girls only, several girls, young women in a house. And they had mentioned the idea of easing in to that sort of scenario. So maybe having the house open 4 days a week, and then having the young ladies come back to their homes for a 3-day long weekend. And that certainly makes sense to us. I think a lot of us would love that option of being able to get folks acclimated so that it's not a shift that has to happen because something critical has happened to us as parents. Just as a word, that's the sort of scenario, though, that would not be available under like the residential habilitation financing situation, because that house has to be open all the time, available all the time. Again, not to say that there aren't ways to think creatively about how to mix and match, but that's just that would be a barrier to begin with. And then just a reminder, participant skills, so that we as parents and we as Hope just work together to make sure that we are doing our very best to build all the skills that are going to be helpful to our loved ones down the road. So making sure that we're not missing anything, any room for independence. I know that, for some of us, for all of us as parents, there are oftentimes that it's just easier to do it ourselves. And at the end of the day, we've got to do what we can survive on, but to have that eye ahead to think what would really make a difference if my person can do these things, has these skills. We are excited that we've been looking for funding to help us, and we're excited that the Civitan group out of Greenville has awarded us a grant for $150,000. So that grant we can use to reimburse for all the planning sorts of stages that need to happen next. So for going to visit somewhere, or for having someone come in, or for building our advocacy network, or for designing plans, or for doing some of the preliminary looks at the land that we own to make sure that it's something that is actually feasible, or to do some search about what other land options are out there. So it gives us a good starting ground to work strategically from our base of what we've gathered thus far. So we would love to say we can just buy the right Lego set and build a facility that, or place that would meet all of our needs. Even so, you would probably all want to, you may have many different sets you will want to buy. You know, we've looked at tiny houses, we've looked at duplexes, we've looked at townhouses, we've looked at apartments, we've looked at dorms, we've looked at the traditional homes. We are trying to keep all of our options open. But we did want to just take a moment before we move forward with this grant to pull you in, those of you who are going to be very much interested in how this plays out, and to get your ideas and your thoughts and your time and your talent to help us move forward. So I see some of y'all have put some information in the chat. So just look at if you have not added to the chat that you're here, if you don't mind, that would be great, so that we can just see who has attended. And yeah, Derek, it was $5,200 a month for that housing. That was some time back. So the final rule, changing the final rule, is something that people have a little bit laughed at when we said that's what we intended to do. But we feel like there is room to change the interpretation of the final rule, particularly in South Carolina, so that we may not be able to change the whole law, but that we can either change the interpretation or get some exceptions for individuals who have a disorder that is characterized by not necessarily loving social engagement. So we've got to think of this in a new way and help our legislators and agency folks think of it in a new way. So good contacts with the Jennifer, thank you for that. So yeah, any of these, anything that comes to mind, what we'll do is we'll gather, if you have other thoughts, if you have other questions or initial comments, why don't you just email them to me and Mark, Lisa Lane at projecthopesc.org, LISALANE, and Mark Knight, KNIGHT, also at projecthopesc.org, and we're on the website. And then we'll start to gather some information from you guys about your advocacy connections, your expertise connections, your preferences and thoughts, and any other creative suggestions you may have for us, as well as things that you want us to see. And then we'll just, our plan is to sort of set up some periodic check-ins to let you know what's happening on this front as we find out things, and then also to prepare to, if we all need to do some of that grassroots advocacy and be smart about it. You know, how do we gather those stories and the data and target the right people to get the to get those interpretations and or variations to the law that we need. I apologize for all the noise in the background, but I know you will join me in celebrating the fact that Colby, who was nonverbal till 8, is saying words, and that he is fixing his supper. by dumping a lot of Italian dressing onto some pre-cooked noodles, but I'm going to take it as preparing dinner. Okay, so Mark, so if you had difficulty in seeing this presentation, I am not sure that we've actually got it recorded like we wanted, but I will go back through and talk through it and put it in a recording that we'll put up on our website or make available to you.
I think it is recording. I think Derek is actually the host now, so he will have to stop recording, I believe.
Derek, how'd you take over?
I have absolutely no idea.
Derek, what did you do?
Derek's a troublemaker, so I do have control. Let me ask this question. So, first of all, let me say I thought that I had retired from activism, but apparently I'm not.
No,
But I have to admit that after Ryan's Law and all the battles we fought together, that I've become somewhat jaded. But I guess I'm going to have to reset for adults. Yet the political environment today is not the same as it was in 2006 and 2008. So how do we need to organize, plan, progress, and deal with the current political environment in order to be successful like we were in 2006, 7, and 8?
Well, I think we're going to have to your words, plan and strategize. I don't know that we have that answer right now. I think there's a lot of different ways we can come at this, including the financial benefit to our state to have things in place so that folks are taken care of rather than pulling from some of the emergency funds. There is right now, and you're so right, it swings back and forth. There's a great deal of interest in poverty and homelessness. Our people would definitely fall into both categories if we're not able to take care of them. So we may have to look at it from that aspect. So I think really it's going to be a lot of, as it was before, individualizing our data and our stories and our presentation to the interest and background of the people that need to hear it, and figuring out who those core people are that can help us along. There's several legislators who do have an interest in autism and or have personal daily life with autism. But again, that it's just difficult because then folks know that one piece of autism very well and sometimes generalize that to across the spectrum. So that's what we need to do. We don't have that plan yet, but that's definitely what I think we need to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically of the senator that is in Travelers Rest area, Corbin. He has two sons on the spectrum, but one of his complaints in the time period we were trying to get Ryan's Law adjusted, so to speak, was the lack of participation from the parent side. It was not the same participation as we had in the Ryan's Law movement, and he felt that was one of the reasons we weren't successful in getting the update to Ryan's Law. So as you said, that's one perspective.
Well, yeah, and it's good to hear. To Val's point, alive and kicking barely, where a lot of us are at that point. Not just the end of the day, but the end of whatever last milestone we got through and cried through. And, I know one of us was going through a guardianship today, and, it's gut punching. It's all gut punching, and it's hard to look at it and not get depressed. So we're going to look at it together. We're going to look at it strategically, and we're going to figure it out. So again, wish we had great answers to give you, but we just thought the time is now to start planning and being strategic and pulling us all together so we can build the best Lego structure anybody's ever seen.
So what do we want to do to stop being the host.
I think,
Because I have,
Mark, I don't know how to, do you have a record button that you can hit that says not record? Down at the bottom?
let's see.
So to all of you, thanks for
Mm.
joining us, and we'll be following up with some information. Feel free to reach out to us. You know, we can start getting some cups of coffee or whatever we need to do individually to kind of think through and get your ideas. And we want to keep you informed as we go along. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You know, we're here for you if you need us. Just tell us what we need to do and we'll do it.
Sounds good. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right. Ciao.
Thank you.